Alright, good morning everyone. You are now seeing me in my own house for the first time, but my name is Luke and I'm the music director here. We're going to start off with two songs. First, The Higher We Fly, which is put to music by John Denver, but is a poem by John Gillespie, followed by Fly Me to the Moon by Frank Sinatra.
Good morning, good morning. Thank you, Luke. That was a wonderful way to start out this snowy November day. I am Miriam Epskamp, the Director of Religious Education for the Unitarian Universalist Community Church, and I am so glad to be your lay leader this morning. We got a little snow, and so we are online only this morning. I do want to remind you that we are live streaming the service on YouTube, and we ask everyone to keep your microphones muted and your cameras off so the video turns out nice online. We will take time for a virtual coffee hour after the live stream has ended, where you can unmute, ask questions, and share any joys and concerns you might have. Our building is on Shaver Road in Portage, Michigan, on the ancestral lands of the Peoria and Potawatomi people. We pay our respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. It is a little brick church with a rainbow flag and a Black Lives Matter banner out the front because we believe that love is love, and it is our responsibility to dismantle white supremacy culture and build a beloved community that benefits us all. We are a community on diverse spiritual journeys, and while our journeys are diverse, our community is compassionate, inclusive, and united by love. Our consulting minister, the Reverend G. Ludwig McCartney, is with us 2 Sundays a month. Other Sundays, we enjoy hearing from differing points of view from guest ministers, guest speakers, and members of the congregation. We are absolutely delighted to have Tony Ettwein as our guest speaker today, and I'll take time to introduce him more fully later in the service. If you are visiting us for the first time on Zoom or checking us out on YouTube, welcome. We are so glad that you tuned in. Feel free to use the chat feature on Zoom or the comment section of YouTube to ask any questions you might have. To learn more about our church, including our programs for children and youth and other opportunities to connect with us during the week, visit our website at uucommunitychurch.org. We have a few announcements this morning. Join Eric Nelson and our Mindful Living group on Zoom at 7 p.m. tomorrow, December 1st, for an hour of guided mindfulness practice and community dialogue. You can visit our website to register. A wonderful opportunity to build bridges of understanding between peoples of faith in our community will take place at our next Thoughtful Thursday on December 4th at 7 p.m., also on Zoom. You don't even have to leave your house. Our guest will be the Rabbi Shelley Goldman from the Congregation of Moses. She will join us for a conversation about joy from the Jewish perspective. We hope you will take time to join the discussion too. You can find registration information for that Zoom meeting on our website too. And Open House Theater, the community theater group that makes its home at UUCC, is excited to present The Night Before Christmas, a fun, interactive show for people of all ages on December 12th and 13th at 6 p.m. and December 14th at 2 p.m. Featuring local youth performance, audience participation, Coco's cookies, and photos with Santa, this show is just filled with holiday magic. Tickets are on sale now at the UUCC website, or you can get them at the door. Finally, I'd like to say thank you to everyone who is helping make this morning service possible. Luke, our tech team, and of course you. Thank you for being here. Now let us center our hearts and minds for the service. We'll start by lighting the chalice. On this day, in small towns and big cities, in simple rooms and ornate sanctuaries, and on Zoom, Unitarian Universalists all over the world will join us in lighting a chalice, the symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith. As I light the chalice, you can join me with the words that may or may not appear on the screen. In the light of truth and the warmth of love, we gather to seek, to sustain, and to share. Our opening reading this morning is from Song of the Open Road by Walt Whitman. Afoot and light-hearted, I take to the open road. Healthy, free, the world before me, the long brown path before me leading wherever I choose. Henceforth I ask not good fortune. I myself am good fortune. Henceforth I whimper no more, postpone no more, need nothing. Done with indoor complaints and libraries, querulous criticisms, strong and content, I travel the open road. I inhale great draughts of space. The east and the west are mine. The north and the south are mine. All seems beautiful to me. I can repeat over to men and women, you have done such good to me, and I do the same to you. Whoever you are, come travel with me. However sweet these laid-up stores, however convenient this dwelling, we cannot remain here. However sheltered this port, and however calm these waters, we must not anchor here. Together, the inducements shall be greater. We shall sail pathless and wild seas. We will go where the winds blow and waves dash, and the Yankee clipper speeds by under full sail. Forward, after the great companions, and two belong to them. They too are on the road. They see nothing anywhere but what you may reach and pass it. To look up or down no road, but it stretches and waits for you. However long, but it stretches and waits for you. To know the universe itself as a road, as many roads, as roads for traveling souls. Thank you so much, Luke. I think Luke had a little bit of fun with the music this morning. I appreciate your selections. So, right now, it is my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker. Retired from a career in healthcare quality, Tony Ettwein is a historian, an author, and a fourth generation resident of Southwest Michigan. He has become semi obsessed with sharing and learning about history, especially about Michigan and Abraham Lincoln. His article, Flying into the Modern Age, Dearborn's Ford Airport, won the 2025 Michigan State History Award for Best Article in the Chronicle magazine at the 2025 Michigan History Conference in Alpena earlier this year. Tony and his family have a long-time friendship with folks at UUCC. Welcome, Tony.
Thank you, Miriam. And it's great to be here with everybody today. I was really looking forward to being there with everybody in person, but the snow had other ideas. I'm going to go ahead and try to get my presentation started here. And please, we ask your patience on this. We've tried it a couple times a day and it's a little temperamental, but let's see how that works. Let me try that again. Okay, Miriam and Joel, is that displaying okay? Can you tell?
We are in next slide mode.
Next slide mode, okay.
So if you go to display settings, see if that worked last time,
Yeah.
and swap. And Bob's your uncle. Go ahead.
All right. Thank you very much. So I wanted to share this. It's really a story about Ford Airport in Dearborn, which I found that a lot of people don't know about, and it historically was really quite important. But this presentation is a little bit about not only the story of the airport, but the story of how I discovered it. And so what I'd like to talk about today briefly is, first of all, how I have delved more into history since my retirement a few years ago, and then also discuss a few related history things that you might be interested in, and then also talk about Ford Airport in Dearborn, Michigan, which existed from 1924 to 1947. But first, some shots that some of you, I think, are familiar with. One of my favorite times at UUCC from years ago, and one of my favorite trips as well, the youth group trip from March and April of 2012 that I accompanied them on. On the left-hand side, the youth group is actually inside the United Nations Annex building in New York City. And on the right, we're in Murray Grove, New Jersey, which is the birthplace of Universalism in America. And some of my family history, Sam on the left is living in Denver now, and Katie is living in northern New Jersey. And Molly accompanies me. We go together on a lot of history trips and so forth. She's also very much into family ancestry, and I've gotten into that a little bit more as a result of her. I have written a couple of books, one about the year 1968 and a largely historical fiction novel about Abraham Lincoln and his visit to Kalamazoo. I'm also on the board of directors of the Kalamazoo Abraham Lincoln Institute, which is really involved in trying to make sure that people know about Abraham Lincoln's connections to Kalamazoo and the speech that he made in 1856. I also spend some time helping others write and publish books and articles. A few things I've written in the upper left, and a story that I wrote about Gerald Ford's parents, and I really immensely enjoyed researching that article about Gerald Ford and his parents. In the lower left, a newspaper, a local newspaper, and as you drive home today, which you might have done, but if you get out on the roads today, as you go past a Harding's or a library, something like that, you're likely to see a stack of these near the door, the good newspaper in the lower left. And the most recent article I wrote was about the search for the survivors of the Edmund Fitzgerald the night of the actual sinking. And then on the right, a story about Muskegon's two floating museums, the submarine, the USS Silversides, and the landing craft LST 393, which actually landed at Normandy on D-Day. But the article that kind of got me here today is a story that was in the fall 2024 issue of Chronicle magazine, which is the member publication of the Historical Society of Michigan, which I'm a member of. That society was founded in 1828 by Lewis Cass. It's the longest existing historical society, statewide historical society in the country. And as a result of that article that I submitted and was published, I was awarded just about 2 months ago the 2025 State History Award. There are a number of awards given. Mine was for the best article in Chronicle magazine for the year. And then as a result of that, that led to two presentations, the one that we're giving here today, and then one that I'll be giving in February to the Albert Kahn Legacy Foundation. That's a group mainly over Michigan. Albert Kahn was perhaps the most famous industrial designer, and he designed hundreds of buildings for different companies, mainly in Detroit. So I'm looking forward to that. And let's talk about the airport. So what was this Ford Airport? Well, it was not Willow Run over near Ypsilanti. It wasn't Detroit Metro Airport. It was not Gerald R. Ford Airport in Grand Rapids, and it wasn't the Ford Airport in Iron Mountain, Michigan, because Henry had some connections up there. Instead, Henry Ford built the airport in Dearborn in 1924, quote, to advance the use, performance, and safety of aircraft. A number of journalists and experts considered Ford Airport to be the first modern airport because it had paved runways, buildings that were designed by Albert Kahn, the factory that built the Ford Trimotor airplane, which was revolutionary, that's on the grounds of the airport. And they also had one of the huge mooring mast, which was used for docking the enormous airships that were in use by 1924. Airships like the Hindenburg and the Los Angeles and some of the other big ones. It didn't have a very long life. Again, it opened in 1924, but most operations ended less than 10 years later in 1933, and it officially closed in 1947. So where was Ford Airport? This is a map looking down, and sort of the kidney-shaped portion, the big kidney-shaped portion that you see bounded by the roads, that is the entire grounds of what used to be Ford Airport. And if we look at some of the landmarks, I don't know if you can see up in the upper, sort of the upper left of the screen, that's the Henry Ford Museum, which is still there. And Henry Ford built the property for the airport as well as the museum. And then Greenfield Village, which is sort of at the top of the screen, he purchased all that property at one time. And then if you look sort of to the lower left, you'll see a semicircular driveway. That is the semicircular driveway that still exists for the Dearborn Inn, which is right across the street. Now, when I've given a different variation of this slide several months ago, that was about it. But another significant thing has happened in that about 2 miles to the northeast of this site right here is the Ford Motor Company World Headquarters, and that is actually moving to just off to the left-hand portion of the slide right here. If you're in the Henry Ford Museum, you can actually look out the window and see it next door. The new Ford World Headquarters is right next door there. People are actually moving into that, and employees have actually taken a tour of the building. So that's really up and running, and they will stop using the old Ford World Headquarters. The Glass Palace, as some people call it, that's in the upper right of the slide that you see right now. And the slide in the lower right is an actual photograph of the new Ford World Headquarters. In the center is the Ford Dearborn Development Center. That is what occupies the space that used to be Ford Airport. There's sort of a brick wall around that. I took this from the grounds of the Dearborn Inn, by the way, which is in the lower left of the slide. And then in the upper left is the Henry Ford Museum, which the design of that was based on Independence Hall in Philadelphia. So more than 3 years ago, Molly and I were looking at some different historical sites in the Detroit area, and we decided to stay at the Dearborn Inn. So the historical marker that you see on the right was not a surprise. All three of these signs are right on the front grounds, right near the front door of the Dearborn Inn. But I was thrown by the other two signs, the one that says Ford Airport on it to the left and the one that says Ford Tri-Motor. And I started reading about those and was very surprised to find that, lo and behold, there was an airport across the street called Ford Airport. That there's really no sign of that now that you can tell. And on the grounds of that airport was the factory that made, again, the revolutionary Ford tri-motor aircraft. And I just had to start researching it because I couldn't just let it go. So I did spend some research, and I wrote the article for the Chronicle magazine. Henry Ford, of course, was an interesting guy. He had a lot of interests. Aviation was just one of many of his interests. His other interests including cars, racing, shipping, business materials. Another big interest of his was preserving Americana, and it was in that area of his life that he started the Edison Institute, which today is called the Henry Ford Museum. And he did such things as moving the Wright brothers' house to Greenfield Village, and the rocking chair in which Abraham Lincoln was sitting that night at Ford's Theater when he was killed, that is on the grounds as well. The picture in the lower left is Henry Ford when he was about 25 years old. And in the lower right is Henry Ford standing next to a driver named Barney Oldfield, who was famous in Indianapolis lore. And this is the race car called the 999, which at one point held the land speed record. It was the fastest car in the world at one point. And Henry actually drove that. In fact, he drove it once across the icy Lake St. Clair at nearly 100 miles per hour. So not a person lacking for courage to get out there. And none of Henry Ford's life really could be told without talking about Edsel Ford. He was the only child of Clara and Henry Ford. And Henry and Edsel didn't always get along, but Henry certainly gave Edsel the credit for the airport. He said, this interest in aviation is largely Edsel's idea, and he deserves the credit. Airplanes belong to another generation. It was also Edsel who introduced Henry to an engineer named Bill Stout, who was the actual designer of the Ford tri-motor aircraft. So there were some seeds of aviation planted with Henry Ford before 1920, and Edsel and Henry and Bill Stout all shared the vision to make Detroit the world's aviation center. It really was the world's automotive center by that point, and they wanted to make it the aviation center as well. And then by 1919, Henry was convinced that in addition to standard aircraft, airplanes, that the big airships, the lighter-than-air dirigibles, zeppelins, and blimps would continue to play a big role in aviation. Well, today we know that that wasn't really the case, but at the time there was good reason to think that they would be. The German Zeppelins had made many trips across the Atlantic and were relatively safe at that time. They were also capable of crossing oceans in very good passenger comfort in less than 48 hours, whereas an ocean liner might take 7 to 10 days or longer. But of course, the Zeppelins relied upon calm wind conditions. If it wasn't calm, it could be a different story. So the vision began to take shape, and then in 1923, Bill Stout and the Ford engineers designed and built the first all-metal commercial airplane in the United States. And then from that was derived the Ford Tri-Motor, which again was revolutionary in terms of being an all-metal aircraft. And it was Bill Stout that convinced Henry Ford to build an airfield in Dearborn. Before that, they would have to actually build an airplane and tow it several miles to Selfridge airfield in order to be able to fly it. So that was Bill Stout's idea to build the airfield. And then they went out and found property that was suitable, fairly flat, took months of thousands of human hours to make the airport, but they made it. And then in 1924, November, Ford Airport opened. It started out with two 75-foot wide grass runways, which were paved 5 years later. They became very muddy in any kind of inclement weather. And if you look sort of off to the right half of the picture, right in the center of the right half of the picture, you'll see the name Ford. And those letters are actually 200 feet tall. Those letters that spell out F-O-R-D, Ford, are made of crushed white stone, and they were visible from an altitude of 10,000 feet. And then once that airport was built, is when the real expansion came in air travel, and Henry Ford played a big role in that. Henry Ford was regarded as being the best businessman in the world by millions of people, not only in the United States, by other countries. And people thought that, well, if Henry Ford thinks it's worth doing, then it's worth doing. So they started to look towards aviation. So in 1929, in the United States, there were 6,000 commercial passengers on airplanes. That grew within 5 years by 75 times. So there were 450,000 commercial passengers by 1934. And then by 1938, just 4 years after that, the number had grown to 200 times that. And so, remarkably, this increase really took place during the worst economic downturn in the history of the United States, of course, the Great Depression. And here listing a number of the firsts involving Ford Airport. The ones in black are world firsts. It did have the world's first concrete runways of any airport. It had a radio guidance beacon system to help pilots guide their aircraft. And it had the world's only privately owned mooring mast, again, for those big airships. In the green are the national firsts, the first in the nation, including the first passenger terminal, first regularly scheduled passenger service, the first airport limo service, and the first on-site aircraft factory and hangar. And also, Ford Airport pioneered airmail and air transport services. So a lot of things that are still in use today that were done for the very first time at Ford Airport. In red is the one thing, it was thought to be the first in the US for a long time, the Dearborn Inn, which is still there. It turned out second. It was a few months after an airport was built, or I'm sorry, an inn, a hotel was built in Oakland, California, that was attached to an airport. But the Dearborn Inn is the second in the United States to do that. So again, about 5 years after the airport opened, the runways were paved at a cost of about $90,000, which is equivalent to about $1.6 million today. And in their book, Milestones of Aviation, the Smithsonian said that Henry Ford's greatest contribution to aviation was in building the first airport in the world with concrete runways. The other big innovation, according to the Smithsonian, was radio guidance, the radio guidance beacon. Developed by Ford engineers, it was designed, there are actually two signals that are sent out, and the pilot sort of finds that sweet spot between the frequencies when it sounds good. And it was beneficial in flying through fog, darkness, and bad weather. And the general principles that were used for the radio guidance beacon are still in use today. When we use our GPS, the GPS is telling us where we are based upon the slight difference in time between how long it takes the signal to get to multiple satellites. Now, this yellow building in the upper right hand is the sort of the radio shack for the radio guidance beacon. That's the actual building that's in the lower left-hand photo back in 1926. And you'll see the cables and the towers there as well. This is the first passenger terminal in the United States, designed by Albert Kahn. And this is the inside of the big Ford Trimotor factory. They initially built one 20,000 square feet that soon burned down, and the 60,000 square foot building was designed by Albert Kahn. And the construction methods, the methods of building the Ford Trimotor were the same as Henry Ford had used on the production line on his automobiles. This is the hangar, again, designed by Albert Kahn, built the year that the airport opened, could house about 15 aircraft. It was considered the most modern hangar in the world, although at the time there weren't many, because most people that did have airplanes did not have hangars. They'd keep them in a barn or a garage, or a smaller airplane, they'd even throw a tarp over to something like that. And the hangar, as well as the rest of the airport, hosted many celebrities, politicians. They had an annual dependability air race, and they had other events over the years. And again, across the street, the Dearborn Inn, 100 rooms, opened in 1931. It was co-designed actually by Albert Kahn and Edsel Ford. Edsel Ford was really an artistic ability. In addition to helping design the Dearborn Inn, he also helped to design some of the Lincoln automobiles from the mid 1930s. And Dearborn Inn was closed for a couple of years while it was renovated, so it's newly renovated inside right now. In the right-hand photo, you'll see a Ford Trimotor flying over the Dearborn Inn in 1931. So all these things took place, and then the last major event to take place at Ford Airport was in October of 1934. And Jeanette Piccard and her husband, this is a round pressurized gondola that hangs from the bottom of a balloon. And Jeanette and her husband, John Piccard, tried to achieve a new altitude record, and they did that. About 45,000 spectators showed up at Ford Airport that day. It reached an altitude of very nearly 60,000 feet, or nearly 11 miles, which made Jeanette Piccard the first woman ever to enter the stratosphere. And about 5 hours later, after they took off from Dearborn, they landed 225 miles away in Cadiz, Ohio, which happens to be the birthplace of Clark Gable, in case you're ever on Jeopardy and need that information. And this is the mooring mast. To date, this is the only privately owned mooring mast that's ever existed in the world. It's 210 feet high. There are actually pipes in there that carry water and fuel and helium up to the Zeppelin. There's an elevator so passengers can actually come down and go up while it's being docked. But it was completed the year after the airport was completed in 1925, and then it stood for 21 years but was only used twice. So all the rest of that time it just stood without being used. And here are the two occasions that it was used, both in 1926, the year after it was built. On the right is a U.S. Army blimp that's docked to it in September 18th, 1926. Less than a month later, the USS Los Angeles, a much bigger airship, used it to dock. And that was it. No other airship ever used that mooring mast in all the time that it existed for about 21 years. This shows you the scale of what those airships were. Now, this is the biggest airship, one of the two biggest that ever existed in the world, the Hindenburg. And if you've ever stood next to or flown in a Boeing 747, right in the middle of the top diagram, that's a Boeing 747. And that shows you the scale compared to the Hindenburg. And then on the bottom, if you've ever seen the Goodyear blimp fly over at a sports event or on TV, that's the scale of the Goodyear blimp compared to the Hindenburg. So a huge difference in scale. All three of these photos are of the USS Los Angeles that you saw in the previous photo. The one in the lower right is just another photo of it docking in Dearborn from a different angle. And the other two photos are the Los Angeles flying over Detroit. Much closer to home, this is the Graf Zeppelin in 1929, actually in the middle of making historic flight. This was the first time an airship ever flew entirely around the globe. And this photo was taken over Lake Chapin, which is sort of a widening in the St. Joe River down in Berrien County. This is about 18 miles, I think, west of where Joe and Nancy Calmy live, and about 50 miles from us right here, so not very far at all. So why did the airship era end? Well, it would have ended for me right here if I'd have been in the USS Los Angeles here and that gust would have kicked up and put it up on its nose like this. I would have probably asked them to please open the door and just let me out. I'd go ahead and fend for myself. But that's what it would have done. That's what an airship might have done with it in a gust. And as indicated at the bottom there, between 1908 and 1937, at least 22 airships were destroyed due to fire alone, and many more than that were destroyed in windstorms. And then famously in 1937, you've probably seen the film of the Hindenburg going up in flames in New Jersey. 36 people were killed, and very surprisingly, if you've seen that, that film. 62 people survived that flame, that fire. So, like all good things, Ford Airport had to come to an end. It became impractical partly because it was sort of landlocked. If you can imagine stepping outside the Henry Ford Museum or walking through Greenfield Village today and having a big jet airliner go over your head. Even back then, before the jets, they could tell it wasn't going to work. So became impractical. But in 1933, the airport closed operations and the Ford Tri-Motor factory closed. A test track, which was actually visible in that diagram we looked at in the map, test track was installed around the runways in 1938. Then in 1943, right in the middle of World War II, Edsel Ford died at age 49. And 3 years after that, the mooring mast, which you see in the photo at the right, you might be able to see that right near the top of that, there are some cables that go down to the ground. They actually loosened the hardware, removed the hardware at the bottom that held it down, and they took some cables and just dropped it right down on the ground that day. That was on October 26th, and just 6 months after that, after the mooring mast was taken down, Henry Ford died. 6 months following Henry Ford's death, the formal announcement was made that Ford Airport would close. The passenger terminal, designed by Albert Kahn, stood until 1961, and the hangar that he designed stood until it was demolished in 2018. But now there's new life on the overall campus. Obviously, it's a great museum in Greenfield Village, but now the new Ford World Headquarters will be there as well. So in conclusion, Ford Airport, I think, was a major historical site that relatively few people know about. And I have talked with people in the Detroit area about it. Some had heard of it, but really didn't know much about it. And some had not heard about it at all. There are several great books about it that I read before researching the article. Also, some really intriguing videos on YouTube and other places where you can see the Ford Tri-Motor airplane being built and other things. And many thanks to the Henry Ford Museum and the Benson Ford Research Center that provided information to me. And that's it. And I look forward to talking with you. I hope you might have some questions after the service today, and I'll hang around for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony, for sharing that fascinating history with us and the fruits of all your research. It was very interesting to hear about Michigan's connection to aviation history. It's now time for us to take an offering. Our lives have been graced by many gifts from the hand of life. In gratitude and love, let us now share a portion of these gifts to support the life and work of this religious community. We invite you to show your support in a very practical way, giving the way we all know how, allowing us to keep the lights on, the internet connection strong, and carrying this life-giving message of celebrating diversity, promoting understanding from the confines of our building to the wider world. There are a few ways to give. You may mail a check to our building, and you may give electronically through the church website or using the Banco app on a smartphone or tablet. Let us now take the offering.
Miriam, you're on mute.
Well, that's awkward. Please join me as we extinguish this chalice. You can say the words on the screen. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Our closing words are by Sarah York. We receive fragments of holiness, glimpse of eternity, brief moments of insight. Let us gather them up for the precious gifts that they are, and renewed by their grace, move boldly into the unknown. May it be so.